Just over a year ago, I reviewed the Acoustic 330i bookshelf speakers. I was left super impressed. Not only that, but at the same time, I received the Cambridge Audio CX-A61 amplifier / DAC, which is just above me, and I also received the QB12 subwoofer. Alas, I couldn't keep the subwoofer, and I just didn't find it at the time I had enough experience to share about a subwoofer. But now times have changed, and in 2021, I'm going to give you my honest, independent review of the QB12 subwoofer, which is not going to be in shot right now, but it is positioned just below me and is now my daily driver. Now, before getting into this review, I should mention in terms of the price. The QB12 at the time of making this review can be found for around £500. That is in the matte finishes. If, however, you want the high gloss finish instead, you're going to have to fork out around £650, which is quite an added premium over the regular matte version. The variant I have is the matte black variant, and in my opinion it looks really nice, but of course you might agree or disagree, so do let me know in the comments below. Furthermore, if you do enjoy this review or want to see more independent reviews from the channel, definitely do subscribe if you haven't already and hit that bell notification. It'd be greatly appreciated. So to kick things off, I do have to quickly just talk about the design of it, and in my opinion it looks really nice. You have got a forward-facing driver, which is a 12-inch driver or 30 centimeters, and it's positioned behind this kind of soft fabric material. Now, underneath the subwoofer unit, you'll find these 4 little metal legs, as you might expect on most premium or higher end audio devices. In this respect, you do also get these rubber bits, which I have actually ended up using even though I'm on carpet. And the reason behind that is because these little metal spikes are pretty pointy and I feel that they will damage my carpet. Of course, your mileage may vary depending on how you position them, so you can use them with their rubber inserts and the metal spikes, or you can remove the metal spikes altogether, although I would say that's not quite recommended in order for you to get the best out of the subwoofer in terms of the audio quality. Now, around the back there is this nice little metal plate which is magnetically attached. In my case, I actually don't use this metal plate at all because I just find it a little bit pointless. But if you want a nicer, flusher look, you can attach the metal plate and then you can route the cables underneath the subwoofer. In other words, if it's off the ground, and therefore gives you a little bit more of a flusher, cleaner look. In my case, I don't really mind about the cables, and as such here I've got a singular cable, which is a QED cable, which is connected up to my Cambridge Audio CX-A61. Now, you can use an RCA input, in other words left and right, or in my case use a mono input, which here, this is what I've been using, and this is the setup that I have. Now, elsewhere you've got an on and off / auto switch, and in my case I leave it on the auto mode because the Cambridge Audio CX-A61 does the right job in transmitting the signal and therefore switching off the subwoofer when it's not in use. There's a little bit of a delay, in other words, to switch it off, but to switch it on it's pretty much instantaneous and the subwoofer is always in operations. To know when it's operating or not, there's a green LED which operates at the back of the unit, and when it's not in operation it's red. Now, sitting beside the on and off switch there is the 0 or 180 degree phase switch, which you can enable or disable depending in terms of your setup. Now, above these switches you've got these 2 volume knobs, and here one of them is to adjust the crossover and the other one is to adjust the overall volume of the subwoofer. In my case and in my setup, I found that running the subwoofer at around 50% was deemed to be the best sort of sonic reproduction and the one that would suit my room's acoustics. So of course, play around with this and see what works best with you, but what I will say is if you do ramp it up to its maximum, it does become really boomy, and we'll talk about that in the sound quality section. Now, as for the crossover, it really was dependent in terms of your own setup, yet again, depending on if your receiver is going to be doing it manually or automatically. In my case, I leave it on the AV mode. In other words, I leave the Cambridge Audio CX-A61 to do the crossover and to determine what to send to the subwoofer and what not to. Here I found to have the best sort of experience because effectively the receiver is doing the hard work and determining what the subwoofer should receive or not. And indeed here it's very much important to know what the crossover range is. The subwoofer has a 40 Hz to 250 Hz range, and in terms of the actual frequency range, which is not to be confused with the crossover range, here the subwoofer will extend as low as 28 Hz and will go as high as 300 Hz. And so with that all in mind, let's get on to the sound quality. Now, I should bear in mind here that the subwoofer has a Class D amplifier. It's powered, in other words, it's got an 8-pin power cable that's connected into it, and yes, that does come in the box as well. And here what I'm going to do is place the microphone in front of its 12-inch driver. If you remember, it's a forward-facing driver, and furthermore, you should know that the total power output of the subwoofer is 220 watts and has got a maximum of 400 watts of peak power. Now, the demo that I'm going to provide you is not going to be ideal because it's picked up from my microphone, it's compressed via YouTube, but it just gives you a little bit of a snippet. First, we're going to go into a music demo, and then we're going to go into a movie demo. Make sure you check the annotations at the bottom so that you understand what is going on, so you're not left confused. We're going to go with on and off, and I'm also going to compare it to my old Teufel subwoofer as well. So as I did mention, a compressed YouTube video isn't ideal, but let me give you my subjective opinion. Now this is coming from someone who had the Teufel subwoofer for over a decade now, And what I will say is that as soon as I plugged in the QB12 in, I did notice a substantial difference, specifically because the Teufel subwoofer doesn't extend as low as the QB12. So when I was watching movies such as Transformers as my tests, and indeed listening to music, which I do very often via my bookshelf speakers, and of course, as I mentioned, like Cambridge Audio DAC and the QB12, I found that my music just sounded all that little bit sweeter. I listen to a lot of R&B and dance music, and often go and delve into EDM music and listen to some classical guitar as well, and here I just felt that the QB12 just delivered that low-end response that was missing in my music. Don't get me wrong, I would have been fine living without it, but it was definitely an appreciation that I had coming from the Teufel subwoofer. Now, for those people who don't have a subwoofer and you were thinking of getting a subwoofer, or indeed upgrading from something that wasn't as powerful as the Teufel subwoofer that I had, well, here I will say that that low-end response that this Q-Acoustic B12 delivers is phenomenal. What I really was impressed about was the fact that it's not just boomy and loud if you want it to be, it is also very precise and clean sounding at very low volumes as well, which is something that I felt that the Teufel didn't quite compete in this domain. It was a lot of quantity when you had it and you dialed up the volume, in other words the master volume, but when you were listening at lower volumes, the subwoofer, in other words the Teufel subwoofer, would seem to overcrowd the sound. And even though I'm talking a little bit, ins and outs over here, small little details over here about audio, I did notice that the subwoofer was a little bit predominant. Whereas here with the QB12, it has that really nice, eloquent production at the lower end volumes and the higher end volume. So if you want to crank out the sound, you can do so and enjoy that subwoofer without it sounding boomy or overpowering. And likewise, if it's a nighttime scenario and you're listening and you don't want to annoy your neighbors and you want to listen at a very low volume, well, if you pair it up with the right amplifier, suddenly you'll have a fantastic subwoofer which is delivering those very subtle low-end response without sounding overpowering and indeed potentially annoying your neighbors. Ultimately, what I'm trying to say over here is that the QB12 really did leave me impressed that no matter what volume level I used it at. And furthermore, the actual frequency range and even the crossover range that this subwoofer unit does have means that you are not really left too hindered in terms of what you can actually get from it. Of course, as I mentioned, it does cut off at around 28 Hz, so if you want something that really does pronounce even lower than that, you're going to have to probably spend a little bit more money or look elsewhere. And so this all leads me on to my verdict, and you can probably see where I'm going with this. The subwoofer unit, the QB12, is really impressive. Not only does it deliver at lower end volumes, but also at higher end volumes. It doesn't go as low as 20 Hz and does tail off at 28 Hz, but for most consumers like myself, that will very much suffice. It's also really well built and has got basic connectivity options, which will again suffice for a lot of individuals out there on the market. Now here, if you want something that's a great all-rounder and comes in around £500, I can't think of a better alternative out there on the market. Indeed, there are some other subwoofers out there. If you do a bit of research, you'll see a plethora of them from a variety of different manufacturers, some being really cheap, being expensive, and some just sitting in between. Effectively, if you want a nice all-rounder, in my opinion, I can definitely suggest getting the QB12. It's left me impressed and very much something that I would definitely see myself using, and indeed it is going to be the subwoofer that I'm going to be using because, well, I just really love it. Now, as a result, this subwoofer actually gets my Best Buy award, and it's something that I would suggest you guys to go out, be it if you have a Q-Acoustic setup or not. Now, that's just my opinion and thoughts about it. I'd be intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. And of course, if you like this video, give it a like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification, as it'll all be really appreciated. Alright, I've been Totally Dubbed. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.